What is up, everybody? We are on day 108 of our Bible in a Year series, reading through the CSB Bible and cover to cover, start to finish, in 1 year. And we will continue on that today once I get this all set and ready. We are in chapter 10 today. We're reading 10, 11, and 12. And we'll jump straight in. Since Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria to the rulers of Jezreel, to the elders, and to the guardians of Ahab's sons, saying, "Your master's sons are with you, and you have chariots, horses, a fortified city, and weaponry. So, when this letter arrives, select the most qualified of your master's sons, set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house." However, they were terrified and reasoned, "Look, 2 kings couldn't stand against him. How can we?" So the overseer of the palace, the overseer of the city, the elders, and the guardians sent a message to Jehu. "We are your servants, and we will do whatever you tell us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever you think is right." Then Jehu wrote them a second letter, saying, "If you are on my side, and if you will obey me, bring me the heads of your master's sons at this time tomorrow at Jezreel." All 70 of the king's sons were being cared for by the city's prominent men. When the letter came to them, they took the king's sons and slaughtered all 70, put their heads in baskets, and sent them to Jehu at Jezreel. When the messenger came and told him, "They have brought the heads of the king's sons," the king said, "Pile them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the city gate until morning." The next morning, when he went out and stood at the gate, he said to all the people, "You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who struck down all these? Know then that not a word the Lord spoke against the house of Ahab will fail. For the Lord has done what he promised through his servant Elijah." So Jehu killed all who remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men, close friends, and priests, leaving him no survivors. Then he set out and went to Samaria. On the way, while he was at Beth Eked of the shepherds, Jehu met the relatives of King Ahaziah of Judah and asked, "Who are you?" They answered, "We're Ahaziah's relatives. We've come down to greet the king's sons and the queen's mother's sons." Then Jehu ordered to take them alive. So they took them alive and then slaughtered them at the pit of Beth Eked. 42 men, he didn't spare any of them. When he left home, he found Jehonadab, son of Rechab, coming to meet him. He greeted him and then asked, "Is your heart one with me?" "It is," Jehonadab replied. Jehu said, "If it is, give me your hand." So he gave him his hand, and Jehu pulled him up into the chariot with him. Then he said, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." So he let him ride with him in his chariot. When Jehu came to Samaria, he struck down all who remained from the house of Ahab in Samaria until he had annihilated his house, according to the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. Then Jehu brought all the people together and said to them, "Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him a lot. Now, therefore, summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants, and all his priests. None must be missing, for I have a great sacrifice from Baal. Whoever is missing will not live." However, Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. Jehu commanded, "Consecrate a solemn assembly for Baal." So they called one. Then Jehu sent messengers throughout all Israel, and all the servants of Baal came. No one failed to come. They entered the temple of Baal, and it was filled from one end to the other. Then he said to the custodian of the wardrobe, "Bring out the garments for all the servants of Baal." So he brought out their garments. Then Jehu and Jehonadab, son of Rechab, entered the temple of Baal, and Jehu said to the servants of Baal, "Look carefully to see that there are no servants of the Lord here among you, only servants of Baal." Then they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside, and he warned them, "Whoever allows any of the men I am placing in your hands to escape will forfeit his life for theirs." When he finished offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guards and officers, "Go in and kill them. Don't let anyone out." So they struck them down with the sword. Then the guards and officers threw the bodies out and went into the inner room of the temple of Baal. They brought out the pillar of the temple of Baal and burned it, and they tore down the pillar of Baal. Then they tore down the temple of Baal and made it a latrine, which it still is today. Oh, that's great. Um, I wonder too, there's got to be some intentionality behind that, right? Like, of all the things that you can make that. Yeah, I think it's fitting. Verse 28, Jehu eliminated Baal worship from Israel, but he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit, worshipping the gold calves that were in Bethel and Dan. Nevertheless, the Lord said to Jehu, "Because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my sight, and have done to the house of Ahab all that was in my heart, 4 generations of your sons will sit on the throne of Israel." Yet Jehu was not careful to follow the instructions of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart. He did turn from the sins of Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. So it's interesting that he doesn't completely turn back to God, but he does take steps, and that is rewarded. Even though he's not completely turning back to God, there's still he is rewarded for what he did do. Verse 32. In those days, the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. Zeal defeated the Israelites throughout their territory from the Jordan eastward, the whole land of Gilead, the Gadites, the Reubenites, the Manassites, from Aror, which is by the Arnon Valley, through Gilead to Bashan. The rest of the events of Jehu's reign, along with all his accomplishments and all his might, are written in the historical record of Israel's kings. Jehu rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria. His son Jehoahaz became king in his place. The length of Jehu's reign over Israel and Samaria was 28 years. Chapter 11. When Athaliah, Ahaziah's mother, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to annihilate all the royal heirs. Jehosheba, who was King Jehoram's daughter and Ahaziah's sister, secretly rescued Joash, son of Ahaziah, from among the king's sons who were being killed, and put him and one who nursed him in a bedroom. So he was hidden from Athaliah and was not killed. Joash was in hiding with her in the Lord's temple 6 years, while Athaliah reigned over the land. In the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for the commanders of hundreds, the Carites, and the guards. He had them come to him in the Lord's temple, where he made a covenant with them and put them under oath. He showed them the king's son and commanded them, "This is what you are to do. A third of you who come on duty on the Sabbath are to provide protection for the king's palace. A third are to be at the foundation gate, and a third at the gate behind the guards. You're to take turns providing protection for the palace. Your 2 divisions that go off duty on the Sabbath are to provide the king protection at the Lord's temple, completely surrounding the king with weapons in hand. Anyone who approaches the ranks is to be put to death. Be with the king in all his daily tasks." So the commanders of hundreds did everything the priest Jehoiada commanded. They each brought their men, those coming on duty on the Sabbath and those going off duty, and came to the priest Jehoiada. The priest gave to the commanders of hundreds King David's spears and shields that were in the Lord's temple. Then the guards stood with their weapons in hand, surrounding the king from the right side of the temple to the left side, by the altar and by the temple. Jehoiada brought out the king's son to put the crown on him and gave him the testimony. and made him king. They anointed him and clapped their hands and cried, "Long live the king." When Athaliah heard the noise from the guard and the crowd, she went out to the people at the Lord's temple. She looked, and there was a king standing by the pillar, according to the custom. The commanders and the trumpeters were by the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Athaliah tore her clothes and screamed, "Treason, treason." Then the priest Jehoiada ordered the commanders of hundreds in charge of the army, "Take her out between the ranks and put to death by the sword anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, "She is not to be put to death in the Lord's temple." So they arrested her, and she went through the horse entrance to the king's palace, where she was put to death. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord, the king, and the people, that they would be the Lord's people, and another covenant between the king and the people. So all the people of the Lord went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed its altars and images to pieces, and they killed Matan, the priest of Baal, at the altars. Then Jehoiada, the priest, appointed guards for the Lord's temple. He took the commanders of he took the commanders of hundreds, the Karites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king from the Lord's temple. They entered the king's palace by way of the guards' gate. Then Joash sat on the throne of the kings. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet, for they put Athaliah to death by the sword in the king's palace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. That is young. Very, very, very young. Okay. Chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. Throughout the time the priest Jehoiada instructed him, Joash did what was right in the Lord's sight. Yet the high places were not taken away. The people continued sacrificing and burning incense in the high places. So that is one benefit of having Joash taking control as young as he was, and having Jehoiada there is, I'm assuming, I mean, that's kind of the implication that's made here. Throughout the time that Jehoiada instructed him, he did what was right in the Lord's sight. So because he was younger, he didn't know what he was doing, and Jehoiada was there to assist, and so that helped him to do things that were right in the Lord's sight. Okay. Verse 4. Then Joash said to the priest, "All the dedicated silver brought to the Lord's temple, since the silver from vows, and all silver voluntarily given for the Lord's temple, each priest is to take it from his assessor and repair whatever damage is found in the temple." But by the 23rd year of the reign of King Joash, the priest had not repaired the damage to the temple. So King Joash called the priest Jehoiada and the other priests and asked, "Why haven't you repaired the temple's damage? Since you haven't done since you haven't, don't take any silver from your assessors. Instead, hand it over for the repair of the temple." So the priests agreed that they would receive no silver from the people and would not be the ones to repair the temple's damage. Then the priest Jehoiada took a chest, bored a hole in its lid, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the Lord's temple. The priests who guarded the threshold put into the chest all the silver that was brought to the Lord's temple. Whenever they saw there was a large amount of silver in the chest, the king's secretary and the high priest would go bag up and tally the silver found in the Lord's temple. Then they would give the weighed silver to those doing the work. Those who oversaw the Lord's temple, they in turn would pay it out to those working on the Lord's temple, the carpenters, the builders, the masons, and the stonecutters, and would use it to buy timber and quarried stone to repair the damage to the Lord's temple, and for all the expenses for temple repairs. However, no silver bowls, wick trimmers, sprinkling basins, trumpets, or any articles of gold or silver were made for the Lord's temple from the contributions brought to the Lord's temple. Instead, it was given to those doing the work, and they repaired the Lord's temple with it. No accounting was required from the men who received the silver to pay those doing the work, since they worked with integrity. The silver from the guilt offering and the sin offering was not brought to the Lord's temple, since it belonged to the priest. At that time, King Zeal of Aram marched up and fought against Gath and captured it. Then he planned to attack Jerusalem. So King Joash of Judah took all the items consecrated by himself and by his ancestors, Judah's kings Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, as well as all the gold found in the treasuries of the Lord's temple and in the king's palace, and he sent them to King Hazael of Aram. Then Hazael withdrew from Jerusalem. The rest of the events of Joash's reign, along with all his accomplishments, are written in the historical records of Judah's kings. Joash's servants conspired against him and attacked him at Beth Milo, Millo, on the road that goes down to Silla. It was his servants Jozabad, son of Shemeath, and Jehozabad. Jozabad, son of Shemeath, and Jehozabad, son of Shomer, who attacked him. He died, and they buried him with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Amaziah became king in his place. Okay. That is it for the reading for today. We do have 3 questions, though. I'm trying to tame my beard. Not that anybody cares. Question 1. Jehu's fervor in eradicating Baal worship in chapter 10 is commended, yet his persistence in sin reveals partial obedience. How does this paradox deepen our theological understanding of the difference between external zeal and the heart transformation God desires? So I think this kind of goes to show that you can be seemingly on fire and passionate, right? And be willing to do all this stuff. But if you don't actually have a heart that is desiring God, then all the stuff that you do it's just stuff. Kind of makes me think of, there's a lot of things that people can put as idols in their life above God. And one of those things, and I think this can be a temptation for people that are serving in ministry full time, one of the things that people can put as an idol above God is serving in ministry. I think you can be working in a church and put your pastoral role above God if you're not careful. You're not thinking about it. May seem kind of weird to think about, but I do think it's a good possibility. And I think that happens a lot. Just saying from what I've seen. Question 2. The destruction of Baal's temple in chapter 10 contrasts with the neglect of God's temple in chapter 11. How might this juxtaposition challenge us to reflect on the theological priority of true worship as rooted in covenant fidelity over mere religious activity? That is a good point. I actually didn't think about that as they were reading, but you see that there's no mention of Baal's temple needing to be repaired. But we do see that with God's temple. And so I think the implication there is that they were making sure to take care of what they needed to take care of with Baal's temple, but they were not doing that with God's temple. So it wasn't even just that they brought in another god. They were preferencing or having preference of this other god over God. All right, question 3. Joash's restoration of the temple in chapter 12, guided by Jehoiada, points to renewal How does this act invite us to wrestle with the theological tension between human efforts are at reform and the need for divine grace to sustain lasting faithfulness? Like I said before, God chooses to work through human hands. And that usually means that it's not as effective and it doesn't actually go exactly the way that he wants it to go, because if humans are good at one thing, it is screwing things up and not listening. So, um, working with human efforts to have this reform is a process, right? And that's what we see. Something else I think that we saw here in these chapters, and I think maybe it's overlooked, but Joash did good while he had the leadership there that was showing him the way that he needed to go. And when he was first took over, he was 7 years old, and he was there. He kind of uh, Jehoiada was there guiding him, is what the implication seems to be, and so he was submitting to that. He was submitting to that authority that God had put there, and he did well when he was submitting to that. So I think that's something that we can take away, is that there is benefit to submission to godly authority, and even if it's not the full on submission to the authority, allowing godly wisdom to speak into us and to pour into us from different places, different sources. So I think it's a good one. And that'll do it for today. Appreciate everyone watching and listening up to this point. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I enjoy seeing comments from people, interacting with people whenever I'm able to. And so always welcome that. If this has been a blessing to you, don't forget to share it with other people. Word of mouth is the best way that podcasts spread. And if it's been a blessing to you, it can probably be a blessing to somebody else as well. One of the purposes of doing this series is we want to provide a means for people to stick with a daily Bible reading plan. And so we're doing this cover to cover, start to finish, in a year. And it gives you somebody that will read along with you every single day. You can start with this video for today, or you can start at day one and just go through. Once we finish this year, we're going to do it again with a different translation. So this will be an ongoing thing for the foreseeable future. And yeah, so appreciate everyone watching up to this point. We'll be back tomorrow with more of Second Kings. I'll see you then. Thanks. God bless.